Hi, my name's Sarah Trentham-Black and I'm the course leader for the MA in Arts and Cultural Management at Sheffield Hallam University.
And I'm Judith Stewart and I also teach on the MA Arts and Cultural Management at Sheffield Hallam University. And this is introducing a series of interviews that were conducted between mid-July and early August in 2020 during the time of COVID. And at this time, things were changing on almost a daily basis. And we were interested in seeing what was happening to various cultural organisations at that time and how they were addressing the difficulties that they were facing. So I'd also like to thank everybody who gave their time so generously to take part in these interviews, which were really interesting from our perspective.
Yes, thank you. We're also interested in discussing how our students can contribute to work with external partners, or how external partners can contribute to our course. And so if you'd be interested in discussing this further, then get in touch with us. And also if you're a potential student, then we'd be happy to talk to you further, and our contact details are at the end of the interview.
So hello, I'm Sharna Jackson and I'm the Artistic Director at Sight Gallery. Sight Gallery, if you don't know Sight Gallery, and I hope you do, you should. We are on Brown Street and we specialise in new media, moving image and performance. So I'm the Artistic Director, which means I look after all of the programming that happens in the galleries and online, and also look after our participation work with our team.
Hi, I'm Judith Harry. So I'm Executive Director at Sight Gallery, co-director with Sharna. My responsibilities are around, business planning, business growth, strategy, as well as the more operational side of the organisation. I'm also very involved at a city level with a consortium of arts organisations who work together to try and make the arts more impactful in the city.
Okay, so what we were particularly interested in is how this situation has impacted on your relationship to your audiences, and that because that's the really difficult bit, isn't it? How you do that public engagement. So if you could just sort of start by saying a little bit about how it's sort of prevented you doing things, but also how you've managed to continue.
Okay, so we closed the galleries on March 17th, I think, if that's right. And we of course very much miss being in the gallery and miss our visitors, seeing them in the flesh. However, it has provided a number of opportunities for us. We started to take some of our programme online. Because we are a gallery that focuses on new media, we have the skills and capabilities to be able to do some of that work quite quickly. So we launched an online program called Website, and that includes films and video content, but also workshops that have been delivered online, reading groups, conversations, and we have very recently launched a new open call called Fresh Takes, which is about the nature of performance and performative work in the pandemic, and what that means to perform at a distance. So it's been interesting from us from a program point of view. In terms of our other audiences, we have a young people's group called the Society of Explorers, and they're 14 to 19, and they would typically meet in the gallery every Wednesday afternoon, and that program had to be brought online. And the participation manager, Peter Martin, who runs that program, has reported that it's been really good, actually. Attendance went up, engagement went up, the work that they made, they really enjoyed. So that was a positive. And we run a residency program called Platform. So with artists in the city, currently 10 artists on that program. And again, we've used programs like Slack to keep in contact with each other. We have fortnightly Zoom meetings with them to see how they're going. Our curator and program assistant on Platform meet with them again individually on Zoom. So while we're not physically in the same room, it's important for us that we keep the connection going, and we are still working on exhibitions in the hope that COVID is a temporary thing, although we know it probably isn't going to be. So we're just working out mitigating like risks and things, but Judith will talk more about that. There was something else I had to add, but it's escaped me at the moment. Oh, but also in terms of our team, our team is also our audience. It's very important. So we catch up daily on Zoom every day at 11, just to see how everybody is. We keep in contact in Slack. We have WhatsApp. So while it is difficult, and we miss each other and our audiences, we're finding ways to make it work.
It's really interesting that your numbers of engaged people in the young people's program has gone up in that time. Do you know why that is?
Maybe because of less distraction, perhaps, the young people are busy and they're coming from college or from school, and maybe because they're at home, it's an extra special nice thing to do. With our workshops, we delivered coding workshops, learn to dance on TikTok tutorial, and we were having participants outside of Sheffield seeing those and being able to attend, which was also very interesting for our audience development. When Sheffield residents of Sheffield are our core audience without a doubt, but it is interesting to see that our remit and our work spreading outside.
So in terms of revenue, as a free gallery, you're presumably less hit by the financial aspect, are you, than say, for example, theatres are? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, that's totally fair to say. We have been impacted financially, of course, but I think those organisations who can be reliant, on 80% of their income coming through ticket sales, they are in a much more difficult place than us. We, as a contemporary art organisation, are very reliant on Arts Council's grant, which makes up about 60% of our turnover. But we've also been really fortunate to have funding through larger foundations. So we receive money from Paul Hallam Foundation, Freelands Foundation, and those large foundations that support the arts have responded in a similar way to Arts Council, which is, we've awarded you this money. We recognise you can't do everything that you said you were going to do for it, but use the money to protect your organisation. Try where you can to keep investing in artists and freelancers. And there's so much more flexibility with those conditions, and that was very true to our hearts. We've kept we've honoured all of our contracts with artists and freelancers. We work with people in quite different ways, so we might have been in the middle of arranging an artist talk or working with artists to deliver participatory programme, or working with artists who are on residency with us, and we've kept the investment with them. We've kept the investment with staff. So although 9 out of our 12 staff have been furloughed in one way or another through this period, we've maintained 100% salaries for everyone, and that's been really important to us. Obviously, with the building closed, we have lost some income. We're about 15% down, which on the scale of it is not insurmountable. But we haven't needed to apply for emergency funding from Arts Council, which it's been good to not have to fall back on that. But we're facing new types of expenditure looking forwards and thinking about, as well as how to make the building safe, how can we best deliver our participatory programme? How can we best engage audiences when people either don't want to or aren't feeling confident enough to come into the gallery? So whether that's broadcasting live from the space so that people can tune in online if they want to, whether it's a hybrid of in-person events and broadcast events. So we're looking at all that at the moment and just trying to find new ways of delivering our activity, which it might be the same sort of thing that we did before, or we might be developing totally new ways of engaging people.
Have you any thoughts about what those new ways might be yet?
There's a lot of examples to look at around the city. So, for example, people who are delivering talks are doing split tickets, so that half the tickets are for sale for in-person events and half for online audiences. The ways that, well, Sharna is probably better placed to answer this, but the ways that we've been delivering the participation activity is certainly something that we could expand on.
Yeah, so we started off using Zoom, but there are some issues with trust around Zoom that some parents raised, and they were absolutely right to raise. So we moved to Google Hangouts, for example. And we are investigating things like Instagram Lives and what you can do on a Slack channel or on TikTok. And it's really thinking about, okay, where are audiences? What are they doing on those platforms? And what could we do that fits our brand and our remit and our goals on those platforms, and making sure that they match. What we don't want to do is just try to, replicate what we might do in the gallery and just plonk it online. That's just not going to create a satisfying experience for anybody. So it's really trying to think about audience remit and platform fit, and taking the work that we want to do on a case-by-case basis.
Do you think that this...
I think, so just to come in there, I think one example of that is that we had to postpone our major exhibition that was due to open in September for a year. And Sharna's now commissioned the artist to produce a series of online works, which will roll out over the coming year. And it's the first time Sight Gallery has ever worked like that and actually commissioned work for an online platform. So things like that will be really interesting, and they're good research resources, just for us to learn and find out what's effective as we go along.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you feel that this situation is in a way opening up a gap between the exhibition programme and the participatory programme, if you've not got the physical exhibition to connect people to.
Not necessarily. The exhibition is obviously is key, and it's like the crux of the work that we do. But there are absolutely things that we can do around exhibition and with artists that don't have to be, works in a physical space. And for me and for us, it's important. The work is obviously very, very crucial, but it's the engagement with the artists and the audiences and bringing those two together that's really crucial. And there are different ways that we can do that. And in fact, I think that it might be bringing those two closer together, because our participation and our participation and curation, we're trying to make sure or ensure that they are considered at the same level at the gallery. Participation is not an add-on to the curatorial. So the curator and the participation manager work together to think about the best ways that the artist can work with the audience without compromising any of their vision. So I don't I personally don't feel that there's a gap, that it's creating a gap at all.
I suppose one thing that we'd sort of find it useful to know is what advice you would give to young people coming into this sort of field of work, looking for careers in the cultural sector. What sort of qualities you'd be looking for?
Well, the landscape changes constantly, so it's difficult. And my personal route into the arts was a very roundabout way. So I've worked in loads of different jobs, including, I did a big stint at Tate, but then I also did stints in startups and publishing houses, etc., etc. So for me, I'm not necessarily looking for like years of cultural experience. I'm looking for people who are engaged and inquisitive and curious and interested. And for me, if somebody is looking to get into the arts, I would be looking for like initiative and thinking about the things that they could do with their available time and their resources. So I'm not necessarily looking for like whiz bang, or I did a huge exhibition. What I'm more interested, okay, how did you make the best of what you had to do something creative? It could be, I made a really interesting I curated a really interesting Instagram page, or I started a blog of my own, responses to work, and was critiquing that in my own time. So it's taking time out where they can afford to take time out to really pursue their interests. And I'm hoping that may be a positive of COVID. It's quite a privileged thing to say, find the positives in COVID, because, it's not a positive experience for many, many people in this country. But if they have the capacity and the space, use that to kind of investigate what they're really interested in and just make some small projects around that for now. And I think that for me would be really attractive on an application.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, whether you're looking for work within the creative side of the organization, or whether it's more management. An organisation like ours is quite small, and everybody has to contribute creatively to the way the organisation is going to build. And as a principal at site, we always involve as many people as possible in in discussion about where we should go, what we should do, what people care about, what people are interested in. So I think be political, be engaged. Say at the beginning of your career, say yes to as many things as you can. Just get involved. It doesn't really, you don't know how your career is going to shape and which way you're going to go. Just get involved in stuff. Whether it's voluntary, whether it's in your own time, whether it's paid, you're learning valuable things all the time. And I think that sometimes people can hold out for the right job without recognising that actually there's a lot of different steps to take to progress. But that said, don't get stuck in a shit job.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right about trying everything, Judith, because you're so right, because then you also figure out what you don't want to do. And sometimes you have this kind of romanticized vision of what you think, a job is. And then you have you see it and you investigate it, or you see it close up and you're like, oh, actually, that's not my thing. And you don't know that until you've, tried it. So, yeah. And for me, it's you don't have to have, leave university and then just have extensive art experience, working anywhere is valid.
Yeah. And, I've done a huge amount of recruitment over the course of my career. And you get, even if you get 100 applicants for a job, you quite quickly scan through. It's like, what are the qualifications and what have they done? And those two things sit equally alongside each other. So someone with a first, or an MA, it's like, that's fine, but what have they done with it? Even at a junior level job, it's like, what have they done? And to be able to put some demonstrable things on your CV, which, it could just be a sideline project, it could be a hobby, but, to actually quantify it and quantify the experience and the value of that experience, to you as something worthy of a CV is a really valuable and sensible way to go.
You mentioned that your main exhibition that was supposed to be opening in September has now been put back a year. So presumably that's had a big effect on all of your planning, because I know that exhibitions take a long time to actually be realised. So
yes and no. The way it worked, well, we were fortunate, again, I have to question my choice of words. When we closed, we had a brilliant exhibition installed by an artist called Phoebe Davies. And when it is appropriate to reopen, we will reopen with Phoebe, and we'll commit to having Phoebe for as long as possible. And then we will move into the next season. So things are just pushed along a bit. We've planned ahead enough to be able to do that, but we've left some like flexibility in our schedule. So yeah, I mean, it's not the easiest or most fun thing to do, to, you know, tell artists that we have to postpone, but, you know, everybody understands it's a global pandemic. It's not like a, you know, site gallery just not choosing to show you at the moment. But it hasn't been too bad to move the blocks along. And we have, during our summer season, we have what we call partnership season, which is where we work with DocFest and the Children's Media Conference, and we show our local artists. And I mean, the festivals weren't going ahead anyway, so everybody is everything is shifting, and we all shift together. So it's, while it's not ideal, it hasn't been the worst thing to do.
And presumably when you are now planning, you're sort of putting in place things that, you know, aware that there may be local lockdowns, and so there may be short-term closures and things. Yeah.
I mean, there's only so much scenario planning you can do. We've got a few plans, and no doubt things will roll out in a different way to any of the plans, and we'll just make it work somewhere in between the 2 or 3 or 4.
But there are some things we're definitely thinking about going forward, that we were thinking about anyway, that kind of COVID has been a catalyst for. So the online program was something that we always wanted to do, and it became a catalyst for that. And then we were also thinking about, we think very deeply about environmental policy and sustainability, and that's tied into social distancing for us. So the exhibition that we have on at the moment, well, we will have on, that is there, is very open, so it will be less of a challenge to social distance in that space, because there is plenty of space to do so. And so is the exhibition that we were going to have in September 2020, that's now September 21. So like, kind of not necessarily writing that into policy, but really thinking about, okay, people are going to want to probably distance for a long while, so how do we, you know, build shows to that effect while thinking about the environment, sustainability, which means for us, you know, not necessarily building structures within the space, and thinking about flow and movement of people even more than we do. So obviously we think about, you know, user design and experience as, you know, exhibition experience and design, but even more so through this lens. So yeah, it's been a really interesting period to like kind of reinterrogate the things that we do.
And I was really interested in, you know, when I previously heard you talking about this on another webinar, about the way that you have attracted and got followers from further afield. And I think you mentioned, you know, somewhere like the Outer Hebrides or something, you had people joining your program, and that just seems to me to be a really exciting possibility with that.
Yeah. Sorry, Judith, I keep cutting you off.
No, it's fine. Go on.
It was for you.
Yeah, I'm enthusiastic. That's all. I'm like, I find it really interesting, because I'm thinking about, you know, what is the role of a local gallery? And obviously, you know, we have a complete commitment to Sheffield. We are there for people in Sheffield, but it is really interesting to see how wide we can, how far we can spread our remit and work with people and talk to people nationally and internationally, especially like post-Brexit. How can we still be involved?
Yeah, and that online programme, it's the start of something, isn't it? There's so much we could do. But in my head, I'm always caveating everything with, we're a very small team. There's only 10 of us working at Site Gallery, and a lot of those people are part-time. But I think a big part of the learning around COVID and having to work from home and not have the gallery is, what's important to us and what are the things that are really impactful, and that's come out quite naturally. I think we've found the things that we really want to do, and going forwards, I think that online programme really gives us the opportunity for a new audience development strategy, which is not Sheffield based. Whether we've got the capacity to do that or not, I don't know yet. But it's really exciting to think that actually we're not, we can reach people. Of course we can reach people anywhere in the world, but actually to develop some kind of relationship with international organisations and international communities, and have that relationship between Sheffield and them is really exciting. And it's, it feels like that can be something that's very achievable for us.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think I'd just like to say, for I guess your students who are considering jobs and careers in the arts, that while this is a difficult time, and I do urge them to obtain work where they can, we really do need talent and new voices, and we want people to continue working in arts and practicing. So while it's a terrible time, please don't give up on art, please. That is what I want to say.
I second that. Yes. Okay. All right then. So thank you very much.
I've started speaking, so I'm going to rudely go first, just because I started. So I'm Iain. I am the Director of Culture for the BGI, which effectively means I direct the National Videogame Museum. So the governing body of the National Videogame Museum is the BGI, which is a charity that promotes education in video games, so the art and culture and how they're made and who makes them, and really the kind of diversity inherent and encouraging diversity in both the kind of workforce and what they could be. The biggest part of our work is the National Videogame Museum, which is a site in the centre of Sheffield, which is on the pathway to accreditation and opened in Sheffield. Conor will be able to tell me this better, but about 18 months ago, having moved from Nottingham. So yeah, that's what I do.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Conor, so I do the marketing and communications for the National Video Game Museum and the BGI. Iain's right, we opened in November 2018, so at kind of time of recording, it's coming up on 2 years. Still feel kind of, relatively kind of new to the city, particularly because, we felt like we'd gotten settled and really kind of it was going super well. We'd welcomed, I think, 40,000 visitors in our first year. And then COVID struck, and we locked down on the 16th of March. That was ahead of the official lockdown, partially because that we knew, our position as a visitor attraction where people touched things meant that, there was possible risk there, that we decided to proactively act there.
Okay, so when you went into lockdown, and like all museums, no visitors. So how have you managed to function, or what have you been doing in the COVID period?
So I guess there's sort of two answers to that. There is a financial answer. So it's probably worth saying something about how we're funded, because the things are, or not funded, because the things are, are kind of linked. So we're not an NPO. We are not funded directly by any public body. We're a paid for experience, as we were previously in Nottingham. So a large part of our survival depends on people paying to visit the museum and having an experience, and and spending money in the shop and all that sort of stuff. So we're not sustainable without that. So the immediate thing that we had to do, which Conor will be able to speak to more eloquently than me, is launch an emergency fundraising campaign. So the reason that we were able to do any of the things I can talk about in terms of what the museum actually has been doing over the last few months is because that swung into action very, very quickly and very, very successfully, which Rick and Conor led on back in March almost immediately. Like most cultural organisations, we furloughed 2/3 maybe of our staff almost immediately, and really I think we're quite a small organisation, so the challenge for us was, first of all, again, like everybody in the sector, going, oh my god, what is happening? How do we administrate what furlough kind of looks like? How do we not die? Was I guess the sort of first month, at least first couple of months of it. And then began to turn to use of of this time more strategically to begin to think about how we need to transform. This isn't peculiar to us. This is anyone working in the in the kind of visitor economy sector that isn't core funded immediately needed to consider, either in terms of just continuing their public engagement profile, or indeed how they might begin to generate revenue and sustainability in the future. Of how do we be a museum when people can't come to the museum? For the obvious answer to that is online outreach, is kind of streaming and events and educational work, and we did again, Conor and Leah. Leah's our education lead, immediately swung into action with some fantastic kind of stay-at-home outreach work that we did on YouTube, which is great. For me, and I think for the curatorial team, it immediately brought forward a question that was really, really important, which is to do with how do we extend access to the museum beyond the building? How do we reconfigure what being a museum means, certainly post-lockdown, and in a world where it's likely that this is going to happen again, but possibly more sporadically, but certainly you can't assume the experience that you need to, like, the primacy of the museum that you're building is going to be the space that people come to. Like, maybe that's not the first thing anymore, right? So what does that mean? So curatorially, in terms of our development, we started to look much more actively at what a non-site-based experience might be. Certainly that might mean kind of online and streaming and that sort of stuff, but there's a bunch of other things that could mean too, like apps, like kind of more pop-up, more transient kind of events and exhibitions and things that aren't necessarily anchored to that infrastructure. So when I say sort of non-site, I don't mean just website in the sense of putting pictures of your collection online. That is important, and that's not to devalue that, but there's something more that we want to explore. So that's really what we've been and continue to be to kind of thinking about as to how do we be sustainable if people can't come, is the sort of simplistic way of answering that. Conor, you've probably got a different perspective or some stuff to add.
No, absolutely. I think we've seen it in lots of kind of cultural organisations and museums, in that a lot of those that may not have furloughed their social teams, that social team felt a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure to kind of constantly keep up the conversation with their audiences as the actual physical space was closed. So we obviously we followed that as well, and kind of we did increase a bit of social activity and reached out and shared some of our collection as best we could, and in particular, because we are a video game museum, we used video streaming platforms, which are massively kind of prominent within kind of video game spaces. Game streaming on Twitch, for example, is a huge business. There's multiple billions of views a year. So we did move into Twitch and move into YouTube particularly, and we found actually really great success with our education focused kind of efforts there, including our first kind of major stream around there was all around creating a pixel art character, right? And it's a digital activity that people could watch along, or they could kind of get involved with and continue using a free app as well. And that actually was just 2 weeks ago was shortlisted for an award for the Kids in Museums Award. So that's kind of fantastic, and we're really happy about that. As Iain kind of alluded to when he first started answering the question, we're not kind of funded, so we did rely on kind of visitor income to keep us going, and we realized very quickly on that if we were going to have to close for this lockdown, we would have to find some kind of emergency funds. So we did launch about 9 days after we locked down. I think on the 25th of March, we launched an emergency fundraising campaign we used Just Giving, and basically kind of shared that amongst all of our audience, and a few people kind of picked us up and shared it on their kind of platforms as well. And after about 2 or 3 months of running that campaign, it turned out to be fantastically successful. It got kind of attention from various members of the games industry as well, that helped us out quite a lot, as well as hundreds of people donating to that cause. And I think via Just Giving, in the end, I think we raised just over £200,000, which is a fantastic amount. And just seeing some of the comments about people kind of commenting saying we need to save kind of video game history. This is my kind of personal history, and I would hate to see something like a museum that's dedicated to saving that go down. So it's been as terrible as it's been at times. It's also been kind of very heartwarming as well.
That all sounds really positive. I'm really interested in what you were saying, Iain, about the idea of pop-up and sort of transient spaces as well, because the obvious thing that everybody thinks is, oh well, go online, but this sort of the foreseeable future, like sort of we're in today with Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire being sort of restricted. Do you think that the museums and cultural organisations are just going to have to be a lot less dependent on buildings and more fleet of foot in maybe sort of occupying temporary spaces? And
I think that for a lot of spaces that is going to need to start to become a part of their strategy. I mean, so there are some institutions that with a big I that can't do that in the same way, because the British Museum-ness of going to that building is kind of important, obviously. But equally, that I don't think they're faced with probably quite the same cash flow problems as smaller institutions are. So my sense is that museums learning from the kind of agility that the sort of the kind of more transient, in a positive sense, art sector has been practicing for as an urban regeneration strategy, right, for a few decades now, is going to be really key for people that need to do it. The tension, and it's an obvious one, right? Is going to be between how much a museum, you can't quickly pivot to that and suddenly become completely, if you like, kind of a physical. I think that there is a like heft, right, that museums should have, and they should have a building, and they should have that sort of weight. And I think that, there's a journey that museums need to go on, or some museums might need to go on, where they kind of redefine what that might mean for trustees and stakeholders in what the kind of heritage sector is, because kind of heritage and history don't tend to be used in the same sentence as pop-up and transient. They kind of feel like they're in different kind of worlds, but I think they need to come close together. And I think right now, anyone who's got a big empty space is possibly wishing that they hadn't, or at least that they were able to, in a more agile kind of sense, do different things with it. If your organisation it doesn't rely on so there's two problems here. One of which is cash flow and survival and paying the rent, right? Even if we didn't need to be open at the moment in that sense to kind of generate revenue to do that, I think we were talking anyway and thinking anyway about how we can kind of more interestingly innovate in different spaces. I think there are a lot of other kind of forms and projects that museums should probably be looking at now, as they kind of redefine themselves for a post lockdown, whatever the new world's going to be. But agility's got to be the thing, right? If anything else, this has proved that anything can happen. Yeah. Conor, are you?
I'm not sure. I think I echo kind of Iain's comments there, in that, when we kind of look at our own journey, it's that agility that has been our kind of saving grace, really. Our ability to move very, very quickly, after preemptively locking down, being able to kind of launch our fundraising campaign within a matter of days. It's worked primarily because we're a small team, and we've been able to kind of, ease through the communications there and ease through the kind of workflows. So, from our perspective anyway, I definitely think that agility and ability to move quickly and respond to audiences quickly and respond to audience contexts quickly is vital, and probably will continue to be so.
Have you picked up new audiences during lockdown?
For sure actually. I think kind of our online reach, we've still kind of focused very much on the local, funnily enough. We found that our audience reach was, or at least on kind of social medias and kind of other kind of ways that we collect it via online, is still very local. People still want to be, the people we're reaching out to are still very Sheffield based, but we quite like that actually, because we want to kind of, one of the big things about this museum was that we did want to kind of benefit our local community that we were based around us, right? But we've seen lots of people from Sheffield that had even said, because due to our new, like, oh, I didn't know, or I've not been yet, but it's great that I'm able to kind of engage with you online or watch kind of some of your live streams about, the collection. So yeah, absolutely. We don't have the data on what exactly those audiences, or what, might be tying those audiences together. But we have definitely seen a lot of new faces, or at least new usernames, shall I say.
What would you take forward from this last 5 months and your experience that you think will be a real positive?
Do you mean that sort of operationally or curatorially or both? Or
both.
Because yeah, okay. So there are a bunch of things we just don't know yet, and we're about to find out. So we're talking a fortnight before we do our first trial, to work out how to run a museum that's socially distanced and that has all of the kind of hygiene demands that a COVID secure, environment needs to have, as we speak today. So that's really complicated, right? So that means that we can have less people in the building, obviously, and they need to be 1 metre plus apart. They need to be bubbled into family groups, or the groups of kind of social bubbles. That means that everybody needs to book in advance, so they can't kind of walk up anymore. It means we're going to do timed entry windows, which we haven't done before. It means that people will need to sanitize their hands after using each bubbled exhibit, which we haven't done before. And we don't know what that's going to feel like. And bluntly, if anyone wants to do that. And everyone that's about to open the doors again, who has been altering their, exhibition offer or engagement offer, whatever that might be, for the last 4 months, is, we're all just about to find out if anybody wants to go outdoors anymore, and do the kind of experience we're describing. So from an operational point of view, there's a huge amount of kind of complexity that we've needed to engage with, that we are about to do a kind of dress rehearsal of, really. I find out how that works, with a view to, all being well, opening in late August. So, back end of this month. So it's quite hard to answer the question of exactly what from that experience we'll be taking forward, because that is going to really depend on what the audience does and thinks and feels, and again, really bluntly, whether they still want to come or not. Because, without being apocalyptic about it, there's absolutely a scenario where nobody comes and we can't exist. That is a possibility. The point about pivoting to kind of do more online engagement, which is definitely kind of what we're moving towards whilst we recover through this. We, like everybody, we're kind of looking at the Arts Council, the DCMS kind of rescue funding, hoping to get some of that to buy the runway to allow us to begin to generate other revenue streams through the kinds of things that, that we've been talking about. So different kind of subscription, different sorts of content, different kinds of sort of pop-up experiences, all the things that we've just kind of been alluding to. We need some runway to get to that point. We're feeling really optimistic about that. I was just sort of, giving you the worst case, just because it is a possibility, right? Lots of people are going under all the time, and I'm sure there'll be kind of lots more. We think we're in a good position based on the feedback that we've had from our audience so far in terms of them wanting to come back. So we've been talking to them lots throughout this lockdown to keep in touch with them and work out, and kind of warm them up, and hold them really on whether they actually do kind of want to do that or not. And we think that they will. So that, that's good, because they're saying so. But I think even when they come back, we don't know what those numbers are going to be. So we are going to need to develop alternative revenue streams in case, overnight Manchester's locked down, in case and when there are other kind of interruptions. I mean, most people are basically saying, look, the next 2 or 3 years is going to be a string of interruptions. Probably not as long as the last one, but there's going to be a lot of them. So we need to be able to begin to prepare for what that means. And part of that is to do with kind of survival and resilience and financial resilience, and part of that is really kind of operational and social and all those sort of things too. Other than, as I said, kind of really developing aggressively the kind of non-building based definition of what the museum could be. Right now we do have a physical space. We can't, I don't know, we don't want to either, but we're not in a position where we can just suddenly not have, and do everything completely differently.
One thing we have been trialing, but we've done a virtual Pixel Heads club. So Pixel Heads was kind of an arm of our informal learning program, that was essentially kind of a club for people that love video games. They could come into our spaces, and we didn't just run this in our museum space, we also ran it in kind of outside libraries or kind of community spaces. And it was just kind of a weekly club for young people to kind of get together, talk about games, learn about games. What we're doing now is actually a virtual Pixel Heads club that is totally live streamed via YouTube. And and is kind of just this thing where people can kind of just get together, and we facilitate kind of sharing of information. We work with very sensitive information in that we ask kind of children to comment, which is why we don't use platforms such as kind of Zoom or other kind of video conferencing platforms, because there are real safeguarding issues there. So we're playing very carefully with how we use YouTube and how we use the comment section there. But so far, we've kind of seen great success with that. It's been fantastic. And regarding the kind of financial kind of resilience there, we operate this Pixel Club totally free, but on a pay what you can model. We're only in a couple there, or we did one last Saturday, but one lined up tomorrow. And we've already had kind of people saying, yeah, sure, like I'm happy to pay a little bit for this kind of virtual club. Whether they visited Pixelheads in physically in the past, it might have something to do with that. But like I said, we are reaching new audiences anyway with that. So yeah, that seems promising for now.
So is there any advice that you would give to people who are considering taking this up as a future career? I think that so this might be I'm not sure if this is advice, I'm not sure if this really answers the question either, but what I have seen I much like Iain, I have a theatre background, and theatre is really struggling really hard at the moment, and I've seen a lot of my friends be made redundant or kind of run out of jobs, and one of the main kind of concerns coming out of those that industry is that it's beginning to come kind of slightly homogenized. And there is a real lack of diversity, and the people that are making these redundancies are not kind of paying particular attention to that and to the kind of diversity of the kind of workforce, of the kind of people that are making up the industry, which is just kind of deeply upsetting, particularly considering we were talking about Black Lives Matter, and that was just what a month, 2 months ago. So what I'm trying to say is that we massively need kind of diversity within the sector, and we need the kind of diverse voices, diverse opinions, and I would hate to see that these kind of troubling times slow that down, slow down that progress. So it's less advice, more that hopefully encouragement for people to kind of please keep offering your voices and offering trying to kind of I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, and I'm running out of words, but hopefully you get the point I'm trying to make. I think that there is tons of opportunity, and I think it's tempting to one of the things I've enjoyed most about working in a lot of different things over the last 20, 30 years, 25 years, is that the culture sector can very easily kind of fixate on quite a limited set of reference points that are defined by existing institutions, and what an arts education is and what that kind of looks like, and doesn't look very closely at other economies going on around it. And as I'm saying that, I'm thinking about kind of new media, I'm thinking about video games, I'm thinking about the kind of AR, VR sort of set and things that are in the periphery of what you would think of as being the culture sector, or what historically has been thought of as being the culture sector. And there's tons to learn from, and to kind of collaborate with projects and ideas and people in those sectors. And they're not owned by anybody. I think there's a real, we could kind of call it, we've sort of been calling it agility, but there's a sort of fluidity as well about that, of not feeling that you're not one thing. I think that's what I'm trying to say. You're not, my piece of advice is, you are not one thing, and nor should you try to be right now, or kind of ever. And that's really different to like how people are often educated. That's certainly how I was. That you sort of go to school, go to university, and do art stuff, and watch a musician, and that's what you do, and then you do that for sort of 40 years, and then maybe you'll retire. That's just not how it is. So forget that. It's all right, but it's much better. It's much better, because you can live a lot longer and you can do a lot of different things. That's real opportunity. That's and I don't just mean that financially. I mean that kind of creatively, intellectually. Because if it's not those things, there's not a lot of point in doing them anyway.
I like that, Iain. I think I I really like that. I think you are not one thing. And
you
I've kind of seen that in my own career so far already. And, you know, because I'm still relatively kind of new to the museum sector, you know, working in the museum was kind of my first job, marketing a museum. But I previously worked in theatre, and kind of always thought myself, you know, oh, I'm a theatre producer, theatre marketer, etc. Or, you know, and it's what's been great about kind of moving to museums is that you're able to take such a skill set that I've built up using all the kind of different kind of working with theatre that I had in the past. So yeah, like I've seen that myself, Ian. So I really like that. Good piece of advice.
I'm Dan Bates and I'm the Chief Executive at Sheffield Theatres.
Do you want to say a little bit more about what that involves, Dan?
Yeah, Sheffield Theatres is the largest producing and presenting theatre outside of London. So we're made up of the Cresswell Theatre, the Studio, and the Lyceum Theatre as well. So we produce theatre, award-winning theatre actually, which happens in Sheffield and then often goes off on tour from beyond Sheffield. And then we also present other people's work in the Lyceum as well. So it's a kind of curated kind of programme, some produced and some presented as well.
And when we last spoke to you, which I think must have been in about February.
Was it when you all came as a group?
Yes, it was either February or very early March.
It was, yeah.
Because at that point you were sort of anticipating some sort of disruption to your programme, but I think none of us at that point had any idea quite how dramatic it would be. So would you be able to sort of talk us through what happened?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of, I think, probably well documented in history that, you know, I'm trying not to use the words unprecedented. I'm bored with it. Nor will I try and use the new normal either. But in essence, yes, our life changed dramatically on the 16th of March, which was the day that the government advised people not to go to the theatre, but didn't shut theatres down. Actually, so we had a kind of challenging period. And then it was on the 23rd of March where the country was locked down, really. So actually that was a clear and very, very clear decision from our point of view. So we shut our doors actually on the 17th of March. And since then we have been closed actually up until last Friday, which was the 31st of July. I'll come back to that in a tick. And but yeah, so everything that we've done and planned we haven't done as well, and it's been a kind of a very difficult time. We have 240 staff and a mixture of permanent staff, part-time staff, and casual workers as well. We kind of come and go as we need, and we've kept everybody on furlough, bar 21 people. So there's been 21 of us working since then. And yeah, it's been a real kind of challenging time for us to be kind of planning for the future, and the future that keeps changing rapidly, and trying to keep our aspirations on being open at the same time dealing with some quite horrendous kind of financial kind of challenges that the organisation has been on. I'll just give you an example, is that an average month of income from the box office is over 700, about £750,000 per month, and we haven't had any. As simple as that. And the only thing that we've been able to rely on is the government support through furlough, a few bits of kind of rates relief from some of our other parts of our organisation as well. So it has been a real challenge for everybody about keeping open and keeping aspirational, actually, as well, whilst we're in the middle of this. Really, I think the kind of key kind of parts of learning for me really is, we could do what we wanted to do, but we rely so heavily on audiences. Our funding is 9% from the government, from the Arts Council, and 2% from the local authority in Sheffield City Council, which we're grateful for both of those amounts, by the way. Don't make me think that. I don't anyone think that. But so that means that the rest of our income, 89% of it, is we generate through audiences activity, really. So be it through ticket sales, be it through individual donations, or simply buying a programme or an ice cream or a drink. As well. So everything that we do is related to audiences coming into our buildings, and that's the work that has stopped, really. So it has been a kind of massive challenge. We applied to the Arts Council Emergency Recovery Funds, and we received some money just a few weeks ago, actually, that buys us through till September this year. And on Monday the 10th of August, a week today, we will, the application process opens for the kind of, it's just here, the Culture Recovery Fund, which is the 1.57 billion fund, which the government announced early July, and actually last week announced the process of applying for that money, which starts on the 10th and closes on the 21st of August. So it's got quite a pretty quick turnaround as well. So that will take us, that will apply for income from the 1st of October through to the end of March of 21. But yeah, so it's quite tricksy times for us as an organisation.
So are you doing any planning for shows or activities at all?
Yeah, definitely. We've got to plan. I will say everything changes. So as soon as we commit to this recording, it'll probably change tomorrow. That's what normally has happened at the moment. I'll give you a very current example of that. Is that one of our jewels in our crown that we have at Sheffield Theatres is that we host the World Snooker Championship every year, which opened on Friday, the 31st. And working together and with the City Council and with the DCMS, it was agreed that this would be a test event for elite sports in the UK as well. Everything that we learnt in Sheffield would then be spread out and would get the return of audiences to football, for example, later on this autumn, I suppose. And so the first, and it's been a very hard job to socially distance an auditorium with 1,000 seats to a kind of capacity of about 280 to 300 seats as well. And working together, we opened our first tournament on Friday morning at 10 o'clock. And then at 12:10, the government announced that all pilots were to cease the following day. So a huge amount of work was wasted, some would say. And so we were able to do three matches on Friday. And then from Saturday morning, all the audiences have been abandoned for the next 2 weeks. They may come back for the final weekend, depending on the latest kind of government advice. But that just shows you how quickly and how short notice things could change. And that's made me really reflect a little bit just over the weekend about what our plans are for the autumn. But yes, so just to briefly tell you about those, that we intend to keep the Lyceum closed until the spring next year, and the Studio Theatre again closed till spring. But we are going to open the Crucible, which is the 1,000-seater, for a socially distanced pop-up theatre that we're going to do inside the theatre as well. So we have a range of activities, from new plays to fun events to music, working in partnership with Off the Shelf, for example, to create a whole kind of series of events happening in the theatre. One of the big things that we do at Christmas is the time that we spend our most amount of money and investment in our productions that give a greater return. And this year we've had to abandon all our plans and try and reprogram them for next year. at some point. But we are going to do, for instance, like a pop-up panto, and so look at a show that's going to be an hour and a quarter long, using like the Panto Dame, which is very popular in the city. So we're going to create a kind of a much smaller performance with just like 5 cast, and that will enable us to make the project viable. We'll perform it 3 times a day, every day during Christmas. But yeah, I think it's really important that we do something. We're not an organisation that sits back. We're an organisation that likes to adapt and be flexible as much as possible, really. So that's what we're going to do. So there'll be a whole series of work that will be described as a festival that will take place from October through to March time next year. By that time, we're hoping that a vaccine may be with us. Some of our restrictions might be relaxed as well. So that's the plan at the moment. But as I said, tomorrow it could change.
Is there much possibility for perhaps looking at outdoor activity?
Yeah, it's something that we have been looking at as well. There are still there's a lot of regulations to kind of do that as well. So we have been looking at that. We have talked about doing an outdoor Shakespeare as well. But I think at the moment, whilst there is such a fear of a local lockdown, it feels like that's not a great use of time and resource at the moment for us. And we'd rather save that resource and put it into something like an indoor theatre kind of experience. And there are also, let's face it, there are some incredible companies out there doing it as well. And we don't want to sort of take away from them this summer as well. So that's sort of what we're doing. We'd like to do some events in Tudor Square as well, but it's not geared up for outdoor theatre performances. And because of the way you have to delineate the area for bubbles of audiences as well, the capacities are really low as well. And again, we just feel at the moment we've got probably better ways of using our resource that we have to do that. So again, it changes.
Have you been able to keep a contact with audiences throughout this time?
Oh yeah, very much so. It's been absolutely vital to do that. We made some very, I think, brave decisions right at the very beginning of this. We didn't cancel performances. Some organisations said, you know, the theatres are closed for the foreseeable future. That's an expression that we've never used, foreseeable future. We've done it in a kind of chunks of time. And said we're closed to such and such a date, depending on government advice, really. And so that meant we've had very regular kind of dialogue with our audiences who book tickets as well. We produced an entire brochure, I keep it here, that we sort of sent out early in January as well for a kind of on sale. And we haven't done any of it, which is a real heartbreaking, actually. Heartbreaking. So we've tried to reprogram a lot of our work, postpone it into next year, rebook people into next year as well. Our audiences have been absolutely terrific. Actually, they had the option of having their money back, to return their money to a kind of our account for them to be able to use at a future like a gift card, or to donate their money back. And a huge amount of people have donated their tickets back to us as well, which is a really, we're so grateful and overwhelmed actually by that. We've been able to, there's been a lot of research done with audiences, both nationally and with ourselves at Sheffield Theatres as well, to try and kind of gain some insight into what people are thinking about, when's a good time to come back to the theatre for them, when will they feel safe to come back to the theatre. And everything that we are reading and all the research that we're taking, both nationally and locally, are sort of saying people are not ready yet to come back to the theatre, which is why we've reached the decisions that we've made about postponing Christmas this year, doing Christmas in a very different way. That's why we came up with a pop-up kind of festival of work, really, because that will be for low cast members and low audience members as well, just to enable us to do something kind of over that time, really. And the research is telling us that people will feel better in the spring as well, which is why we're kind of putting our energies into that time. We've also, we haven't been an organisation that has huge kind of digital resources as well. We've very much kind of, very much sort of focused on making sure that are about the live experience, about people kind of coming together, really. But we have done, we have been able to kind of utilise some recordings that we have of our work as well, archive recordings, linked with other theatres as well, about sort of sharing those kind of resources as well. We've done a lot of kind of new kind of events and kind of gatherings, really. So some are recorded, some are now not quite on our website, or will go on our website soon, under a whole new kind of campaign called Free Cheers for Sheffield as well, which is a kind of tribute to everybody in Sheffield. It's a bit of a thank you. It is free, and so people can meet with the cast of Coriolanus, for example. The run was cut short in the middle of this. I can't remember them all, to be honest. There's quite a lot of them. We've just put a little excerpt from Guys and Dolls actually on our website as well. So it's been fantastic to kind of re-engage with people in that way, really. We've done some events where I've spoken to audiences, or Rob has spoken to audiences as well, just to get people's kind of opinions. And so many people just want to have a chat at this time. They've been in their homes, they've been isolated. As well, we worked with Payne's Plough, where we did some new writing projects as well. We worked with a local writer in Sheffield, and some of the casts, the plays were performed on a one-to-one basis on the telephone to people as well, which has been so lovely, really interesting and kind of innovative ideas as well. We're kind of trying to kind of get through, really. It's been very hard. It's hard to kind of manage an organisation remotely as well. Lots of kind of learnings about that. Everyone is experiencing the same, and we've had to sort of divide up our responsibilities kind of differently. I've been very much focusing on the kind of the very immediate future and the long-term kind of future. Other people have been working on kind of digital assets and kind of planning as well. And some of our work we've just had to put on pause, actually, because we don't have enough people, and we're focusing on survival as best we can.
I think the recording aspect of performances and making those publicly available, I think one of the things that people realised quite early on in the lockdown is actually how much the arts are valued.
Yeah.
Because there was this sort of turning to making things and watching things online. And I think, you know, hopefully that's something that will be carried forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think it won't be forgotten. I think it's probably an and. So being able to have the option of coming to the theatre to get that live experience, and watching it at home as well. So we're doing some experiments as part of the pop-up season to kind of look at that as well. But it's also about infrastructure. We're not geared up for that, and that's perhaps something we need to look at as well. And again, it's, you know, there is only a limited number of resources as well to make that happen. But yeah, it's been really, as I say, it's been really interesting. And the National Theatre have NT Live, which is an organisation that has been going for a number of years, and so they have a lot of resources as well, which have been shared dramatically, no doubt about that.
So it's obviously been an incredibly challenging time.
Yeah.
Would you say it's presented any opportunities for you to rethink the way you do things? Assuming we go back to normal at some point in the future.
Yeah, I think we have to assume that we will be going back to some place. It will be different about that. I think this has enabled us to do, I mean, some of the things are really quite small, but big for us as an organisation. But I think mostly it's actually about how a team of people work together in adversity as well. I think that has been really interesting kind of experiences from my point of view, kind of particularly. I think there's some yeah, like you say, for us to focus our energy a bit more online and digitally as well has been really interesting. I think we spend a lot of time traveling and on trains. I can't imagine that happening as much in the past, since we used to do that in the past, really. Although I do miss the kind of face-to-face. Zoom does give you some of that, no doubt, but there is something nice about working with people and in the same room. I think we've done all sorts of things which are a bit boring, perhaps. It's cool, but you know, like scan tickets and stuff like that. We haven't never had a digital ticket before. We now have those. There's a lot. I can't think of too many things that are really, really like eye-opening for your listener. But actually, from our point of view, we might have spent 2 or 3 years thinking about it, and actually we've done it in 2 or 3 weeks. Really, I mean, that's the kind of big thing. I think that, you know, the reliance as an organisation, as a building that should be open 24 hours a day, I think that might feel differently in the future. We've always relied on for instance, a box office to be open every morning for 6 days a week, from 10 o'clock in the morning through till 6 o'clock at night. I'm wondering if that's necessary. We haven't been able to do that since March, yeah, it is kind of quite interesting, a different way of working. I'm someone that always likes a bit of cash in my wallet, and you know, I last went to the bank in February.
Yeah. Yeah, those sorts of things are really strange, aren't they?
Yeah. I filled up my car 3 times this year.
Yeah.
As opposed to every 2 weeks. Sorry, 3 times since lockdown. You know, with diesel. You know, things like that. It's just sort of it is kind of quite strange, really. But I think the other thing is, you know, we're having to make quite harsh decisions as a business. With you know, 2 of our theatres being closed for 6 months of the year. You know, we won't need all our staff to be able to do that. So we are in the middle of a collective consultation with our unions about how to kind of work that out and how we could offer some alternatives to redundancies as well. And I think what has amazed me is about people's, it's a consultation process. It's for us to hear from our staff about their proposals, and I've been amazed and delighted and overwhelmed actually by people's responses to this as well. And it's been overwhelming is the best way of describing it, really, and their ingenuity as well, and their suggestions and proposals, and about how people could go off and train for a period of time as well, and they want to kind of develop their skills as well. It's, you know, it's very easy not to panic. Yeah, is that right? Yeah, very easy not to panic and just sort of stop everything. But people are really being quite creative and thinking differently, and I really welcome that as well.
That's a good point for me to ask my last question, which is obviously our students are coming onto the course and hoping to go and work in some area of the cultural sector, and I just wondered if you have any advice that you would give them.
I mean, I think you shouldn't forget your dreams. Really, I think it is. You know, we are where we are at the moment. It won't be forever. We'll be different, but I think we'll be stronger and more resilient when we get out of this kind of process. I think for me, it's about making sure you've also got a couple of strings to your bow as well, so that you have a few other skills that could be transferable for a period of time as well. But yeah, I think don't give up, really. There is, you know, people, you know, I think you said this, Judith, right at the very beginning, is that people have really missed culture and have certainly missed theatre. And I think it has really kind of created demand. And I think when we'll be back, we'll be bigger, stronger than ever, really. And I think to hear the government talking about our value as well, the fact that they are putting their money where their mouth is, and, you know, and have found from somewhere, I don't know where, £1.57 billion to support kind of culture. That's a pretty big thing. I think if we'd asked for 1.57, we would have not got it. pre-COVID, but yeah, really interesting. Yeah, I think there's a huge amount of work on opportunities that kind of in the theatre, really. I think the next year are probably still going to be kind of quite challenging while people are kind of studying. But again, I just urge people to make connections with their local theatres as well, or their local cultural suppliers as well, and use that time. People do want to help. People will need help. People are, if you've got the capabilities to do that, then I think that make the most of those kind of opportunities. I think that's what all I would say probably at the moment. Really support your local kind of culture as well as best you can.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Dan?
I don't think so. I think, yeah, I suppose, I think one of the other things maybe just be nice to mention, actually. I'll just try and do it in a clear bit for you. Yeah, I think one of the other things I kind of mentioned that perhaps, you know, has come out of lockdown is there's a couple of things, really. One is, I think people are genuinely much more kind of caring of each other, I think, in some areas. I think the sort of kindness agenda is very much kind of with us at the moment, and people are often saying take care, which they never do. But I also think if you then look at Sheffield, Sheffield has always worked quite well together. The cultural organisations and universities have worked well together. I think this is an opportunity for us to work even more closely with each other as well as we move forward and as we come out of this pandemic as well. So I think there's kind of greater opportunities for collaboration, and yeah, I think that will be a really great outcome for the city as we move forward.
On offer today.
I'm Paul Baker. I'm the director of Cresswell Heritage Trust, otherwise known as Cresswell Crags, on the Nottinghamshire-Derbyshire border. And we are the home of the finest Ice Age archaeological site, and also, more recently, the discovery of the largest number of witch marks, protective marks, anywhere in Britain. Recently, we announced that we were under threat of closure due to the COVID crisis, but an extremely successful fundraising campaign has meant that we are now finally open to the public again.
Okay, so the lockdown, when it came, that was clearly before you had heard any result from the funding applications. So what happened when you went into lockdown? How did you carry on functioning?
The site has 26 members of staff, and when we went into the lockdown, all but 4 of those were furloughed. We selected the 4 specifically in respect of what our needs were going to be during that period. So they included the fundraiser, the marketing manager, finance manager, and myself as director to work more strategically and networking. We were also supported by the chair of trustees who helped us out in a variety of ways and was extremely useful. And so the rest of the staff were furloughed. So at the moment, we're in August, and none of the four who were the gang of four that remained, none of us have had a holiday or any time off since Christmas, and we are yeah, it's been a real challenge for us. We set ourselves the task of needing £90,000 to survive the crisis. In the end, we secured £363,000. However, a large majority of that is project funding. So what's happened is we've gone through a period where we've tried to save Cresswell Crags from closure, and having reached that target, we now have a substantial number of projects to manage. So there's essentially no rest for the wicked. We're still pressing on. The crisis that hit Cresswell Crags in particular was due to the fact that it had been quite a successful site in respect of making up for the losses that happened as a consequence of the lack of council funding, which was taken away from the site from early this year. So we've been very good at filling the gap behind us. However, that meant we had no contingency fund, and with no contingency fund, we couldn't actually reopen again because we didn't have the money in the bank to pay the wages. We would have been trading insolvently if we'd have brought the staff back. So the staff were protected by the furlough system, but we could not reopen until we secured enough funds to do so. Now, of course, most of our funding applications are to do with resilience and how we can survive beyond this period.
So the project funding that you've got, are you in the process of planning those projects, or are you, how soon will the projects be able to happen? So
we secured funding from a number of different sources. The general public were extremely generous and provided, I think we got about £25,000 from them. There was a number of other similar funding, but the main funding came from the lottery. We got £250,000 from them, and Historic England, where I think we got another 50 from them as well. And the, actually I think it's 25. Most of the Historic England funding was to help us to reopen. So the projects there were all about the procedures we had to put in place to keep the public safe. However, the lottery funding was in part to do with that, but also there were key things that we would need to go forward. Those projects started on the 1st of August and have got to be delivered by November. So we'd already set out what it was we were going to do. There were a number of things which were improvements to the site, such as new car parking ticket machines, looking at creating an outdoor horse box so that we could have catering down in our meadow area. A number of different projects such as that, which will help us through the COVID period. So another project fund that we achieved was the Esme Fairburn funding, where we had, I think it was £26,000, and that's going to be our new digital programme. We're particularly excited about that because that's not just addressing the current COVID threat, but we've put together a project, a programme which is really looking at our resilience in general and addressing some of the weaknesses in our business model.
It's quite interesting how many organisations have been plunged into the digital solution and are actually finding that it's doing more than just replacing or being used as a filler for the actual experience. It's opening up different ways of working. So are there things that you've done during this period that you'll take forward?
We've been working prior to the lockdown. We've been working with Sheffield Hallam University on I think it's called a LIDAR scanning process, where we've had an academic coming in infrequently to scan parts of our caves. I think primarily just to test the hardware. And with this, he's creating an entirely digital version of the site, both in the caves and outside using drones. So essentially it captures the site with lasers and then reproduces the site extremely realistically. I'm told that this is going to be used in things like crime scene investigations and gaming. What happened with the COVID crisis is it made us look again at that, because actually there's some restrictions that we have on site. So when the bats are roosting, for instance, you can't go in and see the rock art. So there's periods of time when one of our major draws is unavailable to the public. Similarly, when we've got schools in the caves, the public can't get into the caves, and also for certain age groups as well, and people with mobility issues. So instead of focusing our efforts just on the current crisis, we've tried to use digital to look at the failings in the organisation. By the time we've completed, we'll have 3 new income streams. The first one is a schools programme where people will be able to have learning activities via Zoom, so that we can extend our schools programme beyond our geographical catchment area and offer Ice Age learning, including a digital cave tour with a guide to schools. The second one is we're looking at international markets. We know, for instance, there are universities who study archaeology around the world who would love the idea of a digital tour of our caves. And the final one is we're creating a new space on site, so that when we have capacity issues or when we have access issues, we'll be able to offer cave tours to everybody, irrespective of what else is going on site. And in fact, some of our witch marks, for instance, the majority of our witch marks are in a cave with no floor. So even when you do the real tour, you can't see everything. So we're also trying to create something which complements the existing tour. So people will come and do the tour and then do the digital experience to see it in greater detail. So yes, COVID-19 crisis has brought us to look at our business plan again, and look at our income streams. So we're using the technology not only to deal with the current issue in relation to social distancing. We're specifically saying, well, we want to be ready for whatever crisis comes next, and being able to take our heritage to people, or to provide them a space where they feel secure and don't have to go into a small cave. That's just part of the program. It's extremely exciting, and we're hoping to launch this before the end of the year.
I know part of your site is obviously outdoors, and that's been an important aspect, hasn't it, of the whole lockdown period. People, reevaluating the importance of natural habitats to them. Has the gorge become busier in this period?
Yeah, the gorge is extremely busy at the moment with walkers, cyclists, people picnicking. During our closed period, a lot of people were using the gorge. In all honesty, we were trying to restrict access because of the fact that A, we had no toilets open on site because I had no staff here. B, the way people were parking, because we didn't have the car parks open because I couldn't manage that, the way people were parking meant that no emergency vehicles could get in there. And also we didn't have any first aiders on site. So we weren't really encouraging people to travel long distances to come here, only to discover we didn't have the services on site. However, we reopened a few days ago, And we're now obviously welcoming people and encouraging people to come back. And we are finding that the outdoor spaces are incredibly busy, probably more busier than we've ever seen them. And I think we've noticed, one of the things we've noticed is that how many people are bringing picnics here, which is something which obviously we've got a cafe on site, so we've been encouraging people to use that. But I suspect that that's been going on during the period we've been closed, and people have been coming here and picnicking here. And we welcome that. It's lovely to have people on site. It's just different from how it was before.
What advice would you give them about how to, what sort of qualities they might need, or what they might want to develop to boost their chances?
Well, I mean, the crisis that we've had recently, I think that the key thing is to see it as an opportunity. For us, we're hoping that there will be income generated by focusing, instead of focusing all our energy on the commercial aspect, but actually supporting people at this moment in time. I have daily meetings with my team where I talk to them about the fact that right now, due to the fact that many people have been in their homes and are looking for an outdoor experience, but right now we're part of the COVID. We're part of the COVID process now. We're providing people a safe place and access, and so it's shifted our approach. And I think there's going to be more crisis to come. And I think that those organisations and those people that work in the sector that at times like this address the needs of the visitors rather than simply how can we monetize the visitors will be the ones that prosper. So one is fed off from the other. So I think the lesson that I would tell your students is that we need to be professionals for all seasons, and that at the moment, if you focus on supporting people during crisis, then they will remain loyal to you, and that's the best way forward. So, I mean, that's the only lesson that I've learned, is that shift our focus to being part of the remedy rather than rushing around trying to monetize everything. And that's when you start having people say, we felt unsafe. We won't be going there again. Right now, it's about thinking about our visitors' needs. And we're very fortunate, of course, because we've secured so much funding that we have the luxury of being able to shift our focus from income driving to supporting our community.
And are your staff coming back off furlough now?
Our staff are back off furlough, or should I say, they're on flexi furlough. So the key problem that we have is we've lost all of our school visits. We used to have 2 schools every day. None of them were booked from September, so that's almost entirely lost. Our cave tours are starting again next week, but they're restricted to family groups. So I'm really keen that we don't lose any staff just because we've got haven't got the work for them. So we're finding other jobs for them to do. And many of them are just coming back 1/5 of the time, and the rest of the time they're still furloughed, and that hopefully will allow us to retain all of our staff. We're not looking to lose anybody. We're just looking to reduce our salary outgoing at the moment, because the schools will be coming back and we're going to need these professionals to deliver those services. So if we can find a way to utilise the support that the government's providing and then bring them back as demand allows, then we'll do that. But they're all back up to 100% of their wage again now, thanks to this system. Hopefully it won't be too long. As demand increases, so more people will come off the furlough system. And we've got that, I believe, until October. During the course of this period, we've also been looking at a brand new staff and management structure. And in fact, one of the things I'm most excited about is actually in the next few months, we will have created, I think it's 3 new jobs areas where we know that if there's less people going to sites, and the surveys seem to suggest that organisations are losing about 60 or 70% of their visitors. We seem to be doing slightly better than that, but nonetheless, it's not a good time. But because of that, we need to make sure that we have a larger piece of the pie. So we're actually, the board and myself have actually got a plan for growth during this period. We've got a moment where there's a little bit of luxury. So as well as securing those jobs using the furlough system, in the next few months, we'll even be creating new jobs in the areas of marketing and site conservation, and also in relation to our booking systems. And our relationship with schools. So, and that part of that is because of the digital area. We need the digital side to be a success. We've got some funding and we're pushing forward in that way. So strangely, I know there's a lot of sites that are reducing staff, but that's not the way that we're going.
That's very positive. So is there anything that you'd like to add on this whole situation and how it's affected you?
Well, it's been an extremely exhausting time. The team that have been fundraising have done a remarkable job. We started this process as a fairly novice in respect of fundraising, and I think we've really improved in that area. Also, just the support that we've got from people like our local MPs, DCMS. We're working much closer with some of these organisations than we were previously. And I think that will change us going forwards. We know who our friends are and they want to support us. So I think, as I said before, I think it's an opportunity. One of my favourite sayings is never waste a good crisis. And we've certainly tried to do that. I'll give you an example. Whereas a lot of sites rushed to reopen, we spent a month, we brought the staff back, flexi-furloughed, and we spent a month getting the site looking really good. We've been spending the last few months telling people that we're under threat. So I didn't want people to come back to a tired looking site. I wanted them to come back to a really fantastic looking site. So we've been doing work that has been really difficult in the past because of school groups running through them and places like that. The place is now looking better than I've ever seen it. So, as I say, never waste a good crisis. There's always opportunities to invest in things that you couldn't have done before. And without the schools on site, we've been able to do things like paint floors, which would have been impossible. There's never a time you can paint the floors. So, and other things as well. As I say, the site is looking spectacular. And come September, we will probably reduce the opening days slightly because there's some other major works that we need to get done with the funding we've secured. So yeah, we're feeling quite positive here.
And hopefully the school visits will start up again in September then.
Yes, we expect the school visits to return next year. The funding that we've got will run out in December. By that point, we will be in the middle of our close season and things are likely to be a little bit dicey around then. There is more funding released by the government that we're looking at the moment to apply for. If we secure that, then we will be safe until March. But I think by the time our digital programs come online, they will help as well, so long as we can get the message out there. For many years, we've kept well away from areas relating to digital, but the technology is there now, and we hope we'll be able to engage with more schools. One of the other things that's happened during the closed season in relation to education is we're in negotiation with another heritage site with the idea of us delivering their learning activities because we've reached capacity. And those are the kind of things that given time to reflect on such things, these kind of opportunities can more easily come about.
Hello, my name's Nell, Croose-Myhill, and I'm Learning Programme Manager at the Sainsbury Centre for Visual Arts in Norwich. Shall I say a little bit about the Sainsbury Centre? Save
Yes,
you doing
that
that.
would be good. Yes.
So the Sainsbury Centre is an art gallery on the University of East Anglia campus, and it was established in 1978, and it holds a collection of world art alongside European art in its main permanent exhibition galleries. There's also a temporary exhibition programme and a sculpture park as well. So my role at the Sainsbury Centre is to develop learning programmes for adults and young people. So predominantly working with those who are over 16 years old and who are coming to the gallery independently, so not as part of a school visit, for example. And I work with Lawrence.
Hello, my name's Lawrence Bradby. I'm also a learning programme manager at the Sainsbury Centre, and I work with children and families. So a lot of the groups I work with come from nurseries or community groups or from children's centres.
What we're going to talk about this afternoon obviously is COVID and the impact that that's had on your organisation. You've obviously been in lockdown, and so it's sort of really how it's affected the organisation and what you've been able to do and not do in that whole period.
Well, I think one of the most significant things is that we haven't been furloughed, so we've continued to work throughout. And I think that's quite unusual for an art gallery, particularly during a period of closure. So wherever possible, programmes continued. And I think we imagined it might be a time of kind of reflection and pausing, but actually it's been fairly non-stop, I'd say. One of the things that we were really keen to do from the outset was continue to offer our associate artists work. So alongside our core team of learning staff, we have a team of about 20 associate artists, and they work with us to deliver our workshops and kind of collaborate with us on research projects and things like that. So we made a commitment to offer them the same amount of hours that they would normally receive from us if the gallery was open. So in the first instance, I think we were thinking about how we could continue to work with our artists as much as continue to run the programmes that we would normally do if our galleries were open.
So that's really interesting. So I mean, I'd like to come back to the associate artists in a bit, but when you say you've continued the programme, does that mean that you continued some physical activities?
The things that were most successful during lockdown were programmes which were running before the pandemic hit, which we were able to transition into an online form and carry on working with in some way. What was your question again, Judith?
Well, whether you've been able to continue them physically, but I think you've almost answered that.
So in most cases, we didn't continue working physically, but in one or two areas we did, which shall I describe that? Mm-hmm. So we've started a kind of working relationship with a community organisation called the Henderson Trust, which has some community spaces that it uses and runs summer activities and provides things for people in a particular area of Norwich. And I'd made approaches to them a few times, and they'd always been too busy. And it was only the kind of prompt of COVID and the real fact that people were missing out on food, that people were not getting their prescriptions delivered, all these really potentially life-threatening things that made some connections start to happen that hadn't been able to previously. So we've started working with them to help devise creative activities that children and families can do in outdoor spaces in West Norwich over the summer, which they're going to deliver, but we're going to sort of provide the materials and think about what those activities could be. So that's not relying on websites or social media at all. It's about handing printed stuff to people and then them giving it to the families that they work with already.
So how have your associate artists been involved? How have you managed to keep them employed?
In the first month or so of lockdown, we worked with our website company to build an online studio, which would enable us to host artist-led activities and workshops online, so through videos or kind of a series of how-to resources, if you like. And some of those worked really well, and particularly when they were developed with groups of people, audiences in mind. And some of those felt like we were creating resources, but we weren't sure how they were going to be used or received, and there wasn't really the mechanism in place for us to find that out. Normally, when we would be developing a new programme, there'd be quite an extensive period of research and consultation that would go in to the planning stages, and it felt in developing the online studio that actually we worked very quickly and without a kind of core group of users in mind, I guess. And normally the people that we would be designing things for would be embedded in the process of the designing itself. And that wasn't the case for the online studio. Having said that, it's been the most visited page on our website. So I think people are going to it and people are using the things that have been created by the artist on there. But there isn't the space for dialogue for us to understand how they're really being used or received, and how that might fold back into programmes in the next few months.
We don't actually know if people have used those resources on the whole, because they haven't posted images of the things that they might have made. Mostly these things were instructions. So, look at this image, take these materials, see how you can combine them, that sort of quite practical thing. But we don't have images of what people have made. So even the stats which talk about number of visits to that web page don't really tell us how useful those things are. I'm being a bit more negative than you now on this. And I feel that first sort of month or 6 weeks, a lot of galleries and museums were very concerned to do something and to be seen to be responding, but weren't always sure what that thing should be that they were doing. So there was a sort of existential crisis. We exist to welcome in visitors. We have no visitors.
It seems though that you tapped into that sort of whole aspect that was highlighted in lockdown about people's desire to be creative and to do sort of arts-based activities and things at home. And and I sort of remember reading something about how the whole experience will hopefully reposition the importance of the arts in terms of the education agenda and everything. But so maybe people may not have been posting the results of it, but they may well have been using the resources.
They may have, but they may not have.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed happening during that same period, through April and May, was in Leeds Museum and Art Galleries. One of the staff there was using their going out and about and photographing all the signs around the city which explained their new opening rules or how long they expected to be closed for, all those hastily handwritten or quickly assembled instructions. And they were putting these images of these signs onto their Instagram feed. So they didn't directly connect to the big collections they've got there, but they were about how the city was responding to this difficult situation and those kind of signs of the human hand of people making do and getting by. And I thought that was a really appropriate response, because it was celebrating something that was happening there. It was about the visual and material world that surrounds us. And it wasn't always drawing the attention back to their own collection, saying, you know, don't forget we've got all this stuff in our building, which you can see on our website. So I think, yes, it's worth mentioning other places that we feel have done well, done something interesting and supportive.
Sorry, Judith, what I was going to say was that I think one of the challenges has been how to keep, or how important is it to keep the Sainsbury Centre at the centre of what we're doing whilst we're not there. And that has definitely been a question for us, in the way that the Leeds example maybe moves away slightly from the museum, but actually still seems to talk about material culture and contemporary responses to a particular moment. Some of the projects, again, that I feel have been most successful for us during lockdown haven't necessarily been as rooted in the Sainsbury Centre as they might normally have been. So one of the things we've been doing with our artist programme, which is a kind of peer group for our associate artists, but also extends wider to other professional artists in the region, is to think about working remotely and using historical examples of artists working remotely as inspiration for that programme. So we've taken inspiration from people like Lucy Lippard and her magazine exhibitions for Studio International, or projects that the Independent Group did at the ICA in the early 1950s. So it's not necessarily related directly to the Sainsbury Centre, but it does talk about artistic responses to a situation that we find ourselves in, working independently on a kind of collected or shared endeavour. And they feel like they've been successful projects, not only because they've done what we were kind of hoping to do, which is kind of keep people connected, but also keep people creative. So there's a social aspect as well as a kind of creative aspect to those projects that we are, you know, in a good place to host.
The people in the artist programme had been meeting in some cases for several years, so they knew each other well, and they were meeting physically in a room working together. And what Nell achieved was to move that into a online space, but keep it going. And you said that it even kind of tightened the sense of trust and confidence within the group. Is that right?
I think so. I think something about the existing familiarity with each other and with the Sainsbury Centre and with the programme itself meant that people were actually really pleased to see each other and to continue something that was part of their kind of previous creative practice in this kind of quite extraordinary time of flux. And I think people enjoyed it as a way of coming together, and also a connection back to ways in which they'd worked together before, but also thinking about developing new ways of working going forward. There seems to be a willingness as well to kind of try new things and adapt. So that was quite exciting. It was quite exciting to be working with a group and together thinking about new ways that we could work together, new ways that we could collaborate or share practice or and I think it really did amplify the social, the importance of the social and the structure that programme really provides for those artists.
Do you think this is providing an opportunity to really rethink the way the physical institution operates, that it can become, it could become something that's much more diverse and not necessarily just digital thing, but just a different way of positioning culture.
From what I can tell, there's a sort of retrenchment that we need to get back to what we had programmed. We need to extend the lengths of the exhibitions which have been interrupted by the pandemic, and we need to get back to normal whilst keeping people safe. I don't see evidence from the galleries that I know about of using this as a point to fundamentally change how things are done. I might be wrong. I might be missing the signs.
I feel more optimistic than that. I feel like it is a time of change, actually, and it feels, COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter have seen extraordinary kind of commitments to organisational change and adapting working practices in ways that were kind of unconceivable 6 months ago, or inconceivable 6 months ago. I think the interesting thing for museums and galleries is the kind of material. I really am missing being with the stuff. And I'm also really missing being with people in the gallery. I think the quality of the conversations, the nuances, the physicality of the space and the objects and the people, I think that is a kind of crucial part of what we're doing, and so it does feel compromised when we translate things online. But I also welcome the idea to rethink ways of working and ideas of accessibility and sustainability and anti-racism. They feel kind of at the centre of rethinking our work in a way that I haven't felt before.
I'm uplifted by Nell's positive vision, but I haven't, and I've seen the minutes of lots of meetings, but I haven't seen a change in how or particularly our institution, how it values work, values artwork, and promotes it, organises it, talks about it. So I haven't seen that change yet.
Over the last 5 months, that's sort of the outdoor space has become really important, and you're in a way really fortunate in where the Sainsbury Centre is, in having all that fantastic outdoor space. So has the organisation made use of that at all?
There's lots of messages that go out on social media and on the website reminding people that the whole of the campus is open as a sculpture park, and people are invited to come and use it, to come and look at the artworks, to explore the woods, all those things. So it's the invitation is there, and people are using it, although not as much as they were before lockdown, because everything's been more restricted. Have we been using it beyond that? Oh yeah, Rose has made a trail as well.
I think quite a lot of the collaborations have been based around the sculpture park, and I think one of the ways in which we've been using this period has been to develop kind of pilot projects with schools or community partners that we already had lined up to think about ways of working going forward. So there's been kind of wildlife trails developed in collaboration with local schools that will become available more widely in our schools offer. So I think we're thinking about and learning ways that we can use the sculpture park more regularly, actually. I certainly haven't used it as much as I might, and this feels like an opportunity to focus on that.
I just wondered whether as well in, you know, when and if the schools go back in September and in whatever shape they go back, whether schools will be looking to use more outdoor spaces, and whether that's, you know, those sorts of collaborative partnerships between galleries and schools could offer something that's actually quite positive.
Usually there's a steady stream of schools visiting the Sainsbury Centre, at least 5 a week, sometimes up to 10 or more. And those bookings have dropped right off. So where normally schools would already have booked in their visit in the autumn or possibly in the spring by the summer holidays, this year the bookings are right down. And also we're not clear how we could safely welcome school groups into the building at this stage. I think that's right, isn't it, Nell? So the way to welcome schools will be, as you were saying, to use the outdoor space.
So out of all of this, what do you think you'll be taking, would be the most exciting thing that you could take forward?
This doesn't quite answer that, but the thing that we learnt from the projects that were more and less successful over the lockdown period is that the ones where we already had a way of working with a group of people and established relationships, those were able to survive the transition online. There was another project that I was doing with a nursery school and an artist called Rach Entity Sanders, which was responding to an exhibition some time ago at the Sainsbury Centre of ceramic work by Magdalena Donde. And we started thinking about vessels and containers and food packaging, and then working with that to make these modular objects, often made out of milk bottles, that could be combined into great big structures. And that successfully moved across. And we started turning it into short instructional videos, which was sent to the nursery school and to the families, and then making video calls to the nursery school and talking to these 3 and 4 year olds about what they'd made. So I think it just reminded us about how that when you've got an initial trusting relationship where you're interested in the decisions each other are making, then you can go a long way. But without that, you can't. And some of the other strands of the program just fell away because, well, certainly in my area, I didn't have the sustained contact through Facebook or any other online form, and I wasn't able to keep the relationship going. Yeah,
certainly for me, the thing I'm looking forward to is more collaborative programming going forward. I think, as Lawrence said, the kind of success stories are really the partnership stories, and it really does make the case for kind of building long-term relationships with people that we're going to work with over a more sustained period of time. And that feels like the focus for the next, I don't know how long. But I'm keen that we work much more collaboratively in areas of our programme that we haven't traditionally done before. So that will certainly be my focus for the next forthcoming time.
One of the exciting things I observed is the way that some charities have formed themselves very quickly or have expanded quite quickly in order to meet what they see as a need. So there's a couple in West Norwich that started to do food deliveries and started to collect people's prescriptions and deliver them to their homes. And it's very much a kind of a decision to take responsibility for what these people saw in their local areas. There was one charity that was only dealing with I think it was just with Cossey, so a region of a few thousand homes, and they weren't waiting for the city council or somebody else to give them permission to go ahead. They just set this up and then started to find the links, and in fact they were supported by city council and the Trussell Trust Food Bank and other organisations. So they manage to fit themselves into this ecology. And I feel like this is relevant for well-funded institutions like the Sainsbury Centre, because it can be quite difficult for these places to feel that other people have a voice and an opinion that should be taken into account when it comes to culture. But so, you know, food and culture are two slightly different things or overlapping things, but that willingness to do things now because the need is urgent, people may be going hungry, could maybe apply across into culture. And we'll have to, for those of us who are within these galleries, we'll have to start thinking much more. We'll have to be much more aware of what's going on around, rather than saying, this is what we've got, come and look at it.
So for our students about to graduate in September and who'd been really hoping for jobs in the cultural sector, what advice would you give to somebody looking to work in this area?
In the cultural sector as a whole, or in gallery learning in particular?
Well, either both.
One thing that I've been thinking about, I was thinking about this question and thinking about graduating now, and thinking about graduating from an MA where they have been equipped to think about policies and management and accessibility and some of these kind of bigger agendas attached to the cultural sector. And I feel like they're going to be useful skills, and they're going to be skills that I just encourage the students to continue to think critically about these spaces. What opportunities are presenting themselves, where are the spaces for innovation, where are the opportunities for critical conversations to take place. As I said before, I think it's a time of kind of extraordinary change, and I think that's quite an exciting time to be graduating. And yeah, I would say it's a time to connect with organisations. I think organisations are also very are being quite receptive to their kind of local communities, and now is a good time to kind of try and build those relationships. I also appreciate that financially that there will be hardship, but as Lawrence says, it's a time that certainly art galleries and museums need to be seen to be relevant and connected and responsive, actually. So yeah, I think it's quite an exciting time to be graduating and thinking about cultural policy and management.
What about you, Lawrence?
The thing that has been made really clear by the lockdown and the closure of museums and galleries is how important it is to have people in there. There's a phrase that's sometimes used around, or particularly around kind of funding and art institutions working with wide groups of people or with surrounding communities. And this phrase, art can change lives, or art can have transformational change. And I think that that's not quite true. I think what happens is that lives change art. And it's only when you have people in front of artworks, thinking about them, using them to stand as symbols for their own urgent issues, that the art is useful and updated and worth holding in the public gaze. And working within gallery learning, as Nell and I do, the important thing that we're able to do is to invite people into the gallery to look at the artwork, or bring the artwork out, or images of the artwork out to so that people can encounter it elsewhere. And I think that meeting of two things will be even more important now.
That's brilliant. Is there anything else you'd like to add? on anything or something that you'd like to say that hasn't been said?
I think we've covered. I feel like we've covered a lot.
That's been great, 'cause it's really thoughtful.
Hello, I'm Kirstie Hamilton. I'm Director of Programmes at Museums Sheffield. And Museums Sheffield is the organisation that cares for the city's collections of art, human history and natural science. And we look after 3 sites, the Western Park Museum, Graves Gallery and Millennium Gallery. And we also have a dedicated collection store. So it's quite a wide-ranging organisation. I'm Director of Programmes, as I say, and that means I look after our collections, our exhibitions and our learning programmes and all the activity that we do, essentially our engagement activity, really.
It's quite a lot.
Keeps me busy.
You're about to reopen, but perhaps you could just say a little bit about how the COVID affected the organisation and how you've handled it, really.
So Museum Sheffield was formed in 1998 as an independent charitable trust, and as part of our funding structure, we have about 1/3 of our funding every year is income generated through our activities, through donations, through our shops, through our cafes, through our activity programme, and also through commercial opportunities such as corporate hire. So when we closed back in March, not only did we lose all of our visitors to our exciting programmes and the collections research and the various opportunities and displays were being created, which literally we downed tools and had to walk out of incomplete, but also we lost that opportunity to create and raise funding, which has a huge impact on the organisation. I have to say that the coronavirus job retention scheme has been incredibly important to our survival, and we've really welcomed that from the government.
So were most of you put on furlough for that time?
Yes, so early on, we've furloughed about 85% of the organisation. There was a core team of us who have worked throughout this period of crisis, really, and that has been about looking after the sites and the collections. So obviously it wasn't as simple as not being able to go and see if the collections were all right. You know, this is a major, the most significant really cultural investment that Sheffield has is its museum collection, and also the buildings are historic buildings with quirks to them, so they needed to have routine checks. So yes, we were managing regular site checks and making sure everything was safe and secure, whilst balancing that against the risks to health. So we had a small team that worked throughout, and then the rest of the organisation were on furlough. We're now working the flexible furlough part-time system, where some people are still part-time furloughed or indeed full-time furloughed at the minute, and others are coming back to work just as our activities start to re-energise, if you like, to recover with our reopening.
Okay, so were in that furlough system, were you able to provide any protection for freelance workers at all?
So, well, freelance workers, not so much, it's slightly different, but those who work for us casually, we absolutely were able to support them financially, and that's only stopped recently as the terms of the coronavirus job retention schemes changed. So we did our best, knowing that our staff are not the highest paid individuals. You know, we've tried to really think about their well-being in that.
So you mentioned obviously visitors had to stop. but were you able to sort of find any ways of keeping contact with visitors and supporters who might want to come otherwise?
Yes, so from the day we shut down, we have been thinking about how we share things online. We've absolutely done more work around our social media than we've ever done before, and been posting much more in that way. We've also been creating activities, particularly early on in the closure period. We were thinking who could we help, who could we be of use to, and one of the groups that we identified initially was young people, really, and how do we support those families who are trying to learn from home and provide that sort of inspiration for them to create and learn. So we've done a lot of work, short films really, which are giving activities for people to do. We've been sharing films that we'd create for in-gallery use, for example. We've been sharing those more widely online. And we've also been sharing the collection as much as possible and starting to engage in dialogue about the collection, so just having conversations. And then the other thing I think that was quite important was that we've asked people to share their coronavirus experiences with us, and hopefully, and that will be a longer term thing, but wanting to collect some of that Sheffield-based experience for the collection. Now, it's a bit too soon to say what are the things that meant something to you in lockdown, really. For some people, they know that, but actually, as time goes on, we hope that more things will come into the collection that really do help to illustrate and explain Sheffield's unique experience of lockdown and those stories, throughout.
So it could provide a really valuable archive, actually, couldn't it?
Exactly. So archives are also doing a similar project. So what we work together to make sure that there's a sort of overlap and a connect rather than a competition. So we collect slightly different things, and we're always looking for those objects, which it takes a little bit more, I suppose, hindsight and space to reflect to think what those objects are.
So do you think this is something that you'll continue to do when things are
absolutely
like normal?
So not only have we been just doing things online, but we've also been creating activity sheets that have gone out to the Children's Hospital and out with food packs, and more recently we've been supported throughout. You've possibly seen it in the Sheffield Star. There were pullouts to help with home education and home learning, and over the summer there's been a new one, I think it was called the Sheffield Healthy Holidays, and we've been submitting activities to that as well. So there's a sort of hard copy, because what we're also really aware of is that not everybody can engage online and digitally. So actually we've been trying to create some sort of hard copy, sort of basic ways of doing that as well, so that you don't have to have the tech to support that. But as we go back, we envisage that we'll still want to kind of be doing some things online. It might be that we start to record our talks program and share them more online, so that there's a kind of an archive for them, or we might be doing sort of small short tours, or however it can work. But we're not going to move back from what we've learned, really. It's about how we grow that, and how we work more within communities, really, to kind of help and learn what they really need. So I think the one thing that we have learned is that we need to listen more. It's
amazing how rapidly everybody sort of adapted to finding new ways of doing things. And what's come across with some of the interviews I've done, and I think you've just emphasised it, is that, over the last 20 years, all the sort of attempts to get sort of culture more socially engaged and involved in, get wider participation. And it seems as if this has actually shifted the way that might be done, so that, the social role of museums and galleries is perhaps becoming much more apparent than it has been.
I hope so. I think the opportunity for museums and galleries and their collections to be talking points, to be points of joy, to be points of inspiration, it shouldn't really be underestimated, I think. And I think we need those things more now than ever. We've got some really hard conversations to have, and actually some of the objects that, have been collected over the last few hundred years really help to move those conversations forward without having to that they're kind of neutral spaces in a way. It's a kind of factual historic object that you can be talking around without being so confrontational about it. So how do we use those collections, which can be more challenging, to move the conversation forward in a really positive way? And as I say, I think kind of joy and inspiration, are key. I think a lot of people have missed that opportunity to just go and see and be inspired and kind of learn, use their eyes properly, really.
When you're talking about the more difficult things, do you mean things like Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, I mean, museum collections are built on a colonial past. They're, based in items that have been, collected under a very different time, I would hope. But they're there within collections, and they're very much cared for. And how, Black Lives Matter, I think, really emphasises that. But there's also issues there around climate change, and some of the natural science collections that cities have as much kind of, questioning to be done around extinction and various other things. So I think Black Lives Matter is incredibly important, and needs to be our focus for a good while. But the collections are really varied. Sheffield has about 750,000 things. So, there's a lot of personal, stories in there, and there's a lot of stories which we don't know, and we need kind of help to learn more about them.
So, what would you say the most exciting opportunities have been from this sort of rather unpredictable or unpredicted 6 months?
I think it's that opportunity to rebalance, an opportunity to kind of really understand how culture is important to our lives, and to kind of get it onto an agenda. I think that moving forward, we need to use that space that's there to say, listen, this is how we can support, this is what we can do, these are the conversations that we can be part of, that we can contribute to, these are the ways that we can make lives better. I think it's time for us to really articulate that in a way that I think theatre really did well, actually, when the risk that has been throughout the whole closure period for theatres has been really well articulated within the press. I think museums need to do something similar, but basing it in recovery and how we can help improve lives.
So for our students going into this field of work, what would be the most important things for them to know, do you think, or the most important advice you would give them?
To know, I'm not sure I could tell them what the important things to know are. I don't have all the answers. I think for me it is about energy and enthusiasm, and being able to articulate and communicate, and to make space for other people to articulate and communicate and kind of work collaboratively. So it's really that energetic kind of approach that isn't so much about a one-dimensional look at an artifact, but it's about bringing lots of voices to look at an artifact, and actually thinking more widely about how do you encourage different people to have different valid opinions, without overriding it with your professionalism, whilst acknowledging you are a professional, which is an interesting quandary, I think. So that might have been a bit of a garbled answer, but I do think enthusiasm and your knowledge bank and your enthusiasm, but your ability to let others have a say is really important in certainly in the future of our sector.
Thanks. Well, that covers all my sort of official questions, I think. Yes, I think so. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I don't know. I don't know if that was a bit garbledy.
No, it wasn't at all. No.
But I do think that kind of energy, you meet so many people who've done all of the degrees and all the courses, but actually if they haven't got the energy to go and deliver what they've learned, then, that's what sets them apart. I suppose I could say something about the, well, you asked about the opportunity. The other thing that is an opportunity, I think, is the opportunity for visitors, as as we return, we're actually limiting our visitor numbers, obviously, for to be COVID secure. And at the centre of all that is making, you know, our staff really confident so that they can do a warm welcome, because really the safety and well-being of our staff and of our visitors is key and core to everything we do. But on the other side of that, when you limit the staff, the visitor numbers, then you're actually enabling people to have maybe more special experience. You know, you're not necessarily running into the busiest of places. So actually you can take time to think and look, and I think there's a great opportunity in that for individuals, really, particularly at this time where, you know, we've been seeing things on screens and kind of, you know, like looking hopefully at the world around us. I think, you know, our engagement with nature has really improved through this period as well. But, you know, actually, like I say, just looking more and kind of thinking and looking, I think, are really important skills that we shouldn't forget. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't think I've got anything else, unless there's anything that kind of, you know, I can answer, Judith.
No, I think that's been great. That's been really, you know, it's covered all the areas that you know, we're looking at. I mean, it's what we're doing is just trying to provide a bit of a snapshot, and to also present something that is not doom and gloom for, you know, for our students who obviously are quite anxious.
Yeah, and rightly so. I mean, that's the other side I could say is, you know, you're kind of coming into an oversaturated market where more people have gone freelance than there were before, and, you know, there's less jobs coming up. Yeah. But, you know, who knows what's around the corner as well.
Yeah. And you know, to be honest, people come on our course because they want a job. Yeah. You know, they want to work in the sector in some capacity or other, and yeah, and I think particularly early on, when it seemed as if the cultural sector was just being left out of all the, you know, all the talk about what was important and everything, and I think now it does feel. It does feel different, and to me it feels very much as if there is this recalibration of what culture can be, that is more perhaps rooted in the audiences,
yeah,
rather than the reputation of the institution.
Yeah, I think for a long time we've kind of maybe looked at our institutional reputation and the one, like, we've decided what it is that we're measuring and how it's going to affect somebody and how it's going to, you know, what that story is going to be. And actually what we really need to be is to be open to how things are used in different ways, and actually that those stories are very different and all valid. You know, so it's about, you know, not being as tied to a certain set of tick boxes to what we're trying to achieve, and thinking more broadly than that. So, and investing for the future, you know, I mean, as I say, you know, Sheffield's major cultural investment has to be its museum collection. You know, it's this huge important, you know, archive for the city, and it's one that, you know, we need to use more, and I feel very strongly that people need to understand that it's theirs. It's not, you know, it's owned by everybody in the city, and, you know, it's important that as a young person you have that ownership, so that, you know, it's seen more by schools, and whether it's seen and used as teaching aids, or whether it's, you know, visits to the gallery, it doesn't really matter. It just needs to be used, in my opinion. And yeah, we're going to have to do a lot more work around that, I think, as we get back, and who knows how long recovery will take, but you know, we will recover, and I'm sure of that.
So thank you for watching, and I hope you found those interviews enjoyable and informative. And I'd like to particularly thank all of the interviewees who agreed to take part in this at what must be a really difficult time for everyone. If you'd like to find out more about the MA in Arts and Cultural Management or have any questions arising from the interviews, please don't hesitate to get in touch either with me or the MA Arts and Cultural Management course leader, Sarah Trentham Black. Okay, thanks for watching.
Thank you.